For millions of people across generations, Cliff Richard has been more than a singer. He has been part of the soundtrack of their lives. From radios in living rooms to summer holidays and family gatherings, his voice carried warmth, energy, and a sense of familiarity, quietly weaving itself into memory. For Cliff, music has always held profound meaning. At 84, after decades that tested him in ways fame never could, he speaks with clarity shaped by time. His story today is not about chart-topping hits or records sold, but about a life lived fully in the public eye and the quiet reflections that come when applause fades. A childhood far from the spotlight, Cliff Richard was born Harry Roger Webb on October 14, 1940 in Lucknow, then part of British India. His father worked for the Indian Railways, while his mother nurtured the family through the challenges of a country still shaped by colonial rule. Life was modest but stable, surrounded by his three sisters. And the rhythms of daily routine gave Harry a sense of belonging. Yet the historical tides of India's path to independence introduced turbulence, forcing the Webb family to make the difficult decision to leave the only home they had known and start anew in England. Those early years left a deep imprint on Cliff, teaching him resilience, adaptability, and a quiet appreciation for stability, starting over in a new country. In 1948, the Webb family set sail for England, exchanging familiar warmth for the unknown. Britain was colder and less forgiving, with cramped housing and tighter finances. Cliff attended multiple schools as his family sought stability, eventually settling in Cheshunt in a council house that offered a sense of permanence. It was in this environment that young Harry began to find his footing, both academically and emotionally. He learned to navigate change, adjust to new circumstances, and keep moving forward, even when life felt unfair. Those early lessons in perseverance would become a quiet backbone for his later career. Discovering music by accident. Like many teenagers in post-war Britain, Cliff found solace in music. Skiffle and early rock and roll records filled homes and airwaves, and their energy sparked something inside him. When his father bought him a guitar at 16, it was a small gesture, almost casual, but it opened a door to a world of expression. Playing in small groups and singing harmonies gave him confidence and a sense of identity. Music became more than a hobby, it became a compass, shaping his ambitions and guiding him toward a path that would ultimately redefine his life. Becoming Cliff Richard Harry Webb's transformation into Cliff Richard was more than a change of name. Cliff conveyed strength. Richard honored one of his inspirations, Little Richard, and together they gave him a persona that could step boldly into the spotlight. On stage, he shed shyness and uncertainty, finding a version of himself that could sing, move, and perform without hesitation. His early performances were raw but full of conviction, and by 1958, when he first appeared on a major stage, the young performer knew he was on the path to something extraordinary. The song that changed British music. When Cliff recorded Move It, initially meant to be a B-side, no one anticipated its impact. The song's energy, edge, and distinctly British rock and roll feel captured the imagination of audiences and critics alike. It climbed the charts, electrified television appearances, and drew praise from fellow musicians. Suddenly, Cliff Richard was not just another performer, he was at the forefront of a cultural shift. British rock and roll had found its voice, and Cliff was the figure through which it spoke. The song's success marked the beginning of an era in which his influence on music would become undeniable. The Shadows and the birth of a phenomenon. Cliff's career gained momentum with the formation of The Shadows, a band that became integral to his sound and identity. Together, they created a balance of melody, rhythm, and innovation that defined the era before the Beatles' rise. Songs like Living Doll cemented Cliff's position as Britain's leading rock and pop star. The chemistry between him and The Shadows was effortless, making their music resonate deeply with audiences. This collaboration was more than professional. It was a shared passion that shaped a generation, making Cliff Richard and The Shadows synonymous with British musical excellence. More than a singer, Cliff Richard's talents were not confined to music. Films, television, and live tours expanded his reach, making him one of the most visible entertainers in Britain. Over time, his music evolved to reflect maturity, faith, and personal reflection rather than youthful rebellion. Rather than chasing trends or clinging to the past, Cliff's evolution mirrored the growth of his audience, creating a career that spanned decades because of honesty, integrity, and adaptability. His enduring presence is a testament not to following the latest fad, but to maintaining authenticity in every stage of his artistic journey. A career measured in milestones. The sheer numbers of Cliff Richard's career are staggering. Over 250 million records sold worldwide, more than 130 charting releases in the UK, and top 10 hits across 6 consecutive decades. Few artists can claim such longevity. While America never embraced him as fully as Britain did, his international following remained strong, particularly in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and parts of Asia. Honors, including a knighthood, came as recognition of his contributions, but Cliff has always approached them as acknowledgments rather than definitions of his identity. Losing his father too soon, success did not shield Cliff from personal loss. In 1961, his father passed away at 56 when Cliff was just 20. The loss was profound. His father had been a steady guide, a source of encouragement, and a grounding influence during the early years of fame. Cliff has reflected on the enduring impact of that absence, acknowledging that his father never witnessed the full arc of his career or the heights he would achieve, a reality that brought quiet sorrow alongside the triumphs of his professional life. Watching his mother fade, decades later, Cliff faced the slow heartbreak of watching his mother live with Alzheimer's disease. Caring for her alongside his sisters, he experienced a form of grief that was intimate and relentless, witnessing the gradual fading of someone who had been the anchor of his life. When she passed in 2007, it marked the closing of a chapter that had shaped him from India to England, from youth to fame. Her presence had been a constant, and her absence left a space that could never truly be filled, yet her influence remained in his compassion, resilience, and sense of duty toward others. Family, bonds, and another. Goodbye. Cliff's connection to his sisters was always profound, making the loss of his younger sister Donna in 2016 especially difficult. Donna had been part of his earliest creative life, offering support, encouragement, and practical help as he navigated the beginnings of his career. Her passing during a period already marked by stress reminded Cliff that grief is universal, and no measure of success can shield one from the depth of personal loss. Family, for him, has always been the foundation upon which everything else rests. Enduring public scrutiny. With dignity as a public figure, Cliff faced scrutiny, speculation, and moments of personal challenge. The pressure of being constantly observed tested him emotionally, but he chose not to allow bitterness to define him. Instead, he approached life with dignity, focusing on healing, fairness, and understanding rather than retaliation. His reflections show a person who believes that one's response to hardship is more telling than the hardship itself, and that maintaining character under pressure is a quiet but enduring triumph. Love, choices, and sacrifice. Cliff Richard made an early choice to prioritize his career, a decision that shaped his romantic life profoundly. While he experienced deep affection and meaningful connections, marriage always felt like a commitment difficult to sustain amidst constant touring and public demands. His relationships were sincere and formative, teaching him lessons in love, companionship, and in the balance between personal desires and professional responsibility. He reflects on these choices not with regret, but as honest trade-offs that defined the path he wanted to follow. Living outside expectations. Cliff's personal life often attracted speculation, much of it rooted in society's expectations about conformity. He responded calmly, emphasizing that fulfillment does not follow a single template. By living authentically, he demonstrated that happiness comes from integrity, self-awareness, and meaningful connections rather than adhering to external pressures. His life serves as a quiet reminder that individuality and choice are as valuable as public approval. Friendship as family. Though he never married, Cliff was never truly alone. Friends, colleagues, and companions formed a chosen family around him, providing support, laughter, and stability across decades. Loyalty was a value he held deeply, and the reciprocity of trust and care in these relationships became a cornerstone of his life. For Cliff, home was never a building. It was the people who shared love, creativity, and companionship with him. Faith that evolved with time. Faith has always been part of Cliff's life, though it grew and matured over time. Life's challenges, including loss and change, shaped a perspective rooted in compassion, sincerity, and kindness. Over the years, he learned that labels matter less than the quality of one's intentions and that living with integrity is more significant than any external designation. This evolution of belief has brought him peace, grounding, and perspective, influencing both his personal life and artistic choices. Aging in the public eye. At 84, Cliff speaks candidly about the realities of aging. Touring and performing demand more effort, recovery takes longer, and his voice does not always cooperate as it once did. Yet he approaches these challenges with honesty and acceptance, valuing the joy of music over perfection. Aging for Cliff has become a lesson in respecting one's body, pacing oneself, and embracing limitations without losing passion. Thoughts about mortality. Cliff's reflections on mortality are thoughtful rather than fearful. He understands the fleeting nature of time and focuses on presence, gratitude, and participation in life rather than anxiety about the future. By performing, resting, and living intentionally, he achieves a balance that allows freedom and peace, demonstrating a quiet wisdom earned through decades of experience. Not retiring, just pausing. Cliff resists the word retirement, seeing it as a closure rather than a choice. He approaches performance as a dialogue between instinct, energy, and opportunity. If the stage calls to him, he wants the freedom to respond. To him, pausing is about listening to oneself, not ceasing entirely, and leaving the door open is an act of both humility and hope. Still standing, still singing in 2025, Cliff continues to tour, supported by musicians he considers family. The energy is different now, more intimate, reflective, and seasoned, but no less heartfelt. He sings because it brings joy to himself and comfort to his audience, creating a shared space of connection and understanding. Every note carries decades of experience, emotion, and sincerity, showing that true artistry grows richer with time rather than fading. A legacy beyond records. Cliff Richard's legacy transcends numbers. It resides in resilience, grace under pressure, and a steadfast commitment to living authentically. He did not follow trends. He followed his convictions, creating a body of work that reflects dedication, integrity, and a connection to the human experience. His life illustrates that longevity and influence are achieved not merely through talent, but through consistent choices that honor oneself and others. The quiet truth about his life. Today, Cliff Richard lives with awareness, gratitude, and calm. He has known loss, joy, challenge, and triumph, and he has endured public scrutiny and personal grief. Yet he remains present, generous, and grounded. His story reminds us that a meaningful life is defined not by perfection, but by perseverance, authenticity, and the willingness to keep singing even as the voice softens. Cliff's journey continues to inspire, offering lessons in resilience, compassion, and the enduring power of a life lived fully.